Let's be real, 2024 was not that great of a landscape when it came to movies. Sure, there were a few hidden gems here and there, but it was largely a year of stinkers. I mean, it's just a fact. Now, I hope you're ready because I've got my top 10 worst films of 2024. And I'll be honest, I had some high hopes for a few of the entries on this list, but ultimately, they failed. So, spoiler warning, but here is the top 10 worst films of 2024. Hi everyone, my name is Jacob Berry. Welcome to the StudioJake vidcast where I talk about all things pop culture. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And if you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. Like I said, this is a list of the top 10 worst films of 2024, but I wanted to kick it off with a dishonorable mention, and this was Conclave. So, for those of you unaware, Conclave was a film that came out very late in 2024. It was made on a shoestring budget, ergo, it made money at the box office, but it is about a pope passing away and how the conclave of cardinals and archbishops, I guess, come together to decide on a new pope. And let's just say that it was boring and trite. But yes, it's getting all the accolades. Why is that? Because it has the right message for Hollywood, and I have a feeling it's going to be nominated at least for Best Pictures at the Oscars. Why? It is their woke criticism of religion. In this movie, conservative Catholics are portrayed as mean and conniving, rude, and to the point where they're backstabbing their friends, all to possibly become a new pope. Meanwhile, the liberals on the Catholic field, they want to abandon truth, reason, and faith, all for a subjectivity, all for this sort of progressivism, you could say. It was very boring. Now, I will say the performances were okay, and you can read more of my review at my website, StudioJakeMedia.com, where you can find reviews for all these movies I'm about to go into. All right, number 10 is Atlas. Jenny from the Block, also known as J-Lo, also known as Jennifer Lopez, also known as Ben Affleck's ex-wife, twice. She stars in this sci-fi thriller about humans who are going off to a planet to stop a robot that used to work for Jenny from the Block's mother. And let's just say it is just a copycat of hundreds of other movies that we've seen 100 other times, and there is nothing unique about it. Nothing. It comes off as very gimmicky, and Jennifer Lopez is way out of her element. Now, I've seen movies where she's performed pretty decently as far as acting, but this was not one of them, hence why it made the list. It was just sort of a typical, not even B movie on Netflix. Number 9, we have Miller's Girl, which stars Jenna Ortega as a high school student who decides to falsely accuse her teacher of grooming her, basically. And the teacher is played by Martin Freeman. And the movie basically kind of glorifies this. Now, the teacher does cross some boundaries, but never to the point of inappropriateness, at least not as presented in the movie. But the movie kind of is the epitome of Hollywood mediocrity and shallow morals. The acting is not as good, and I like Freeman and Ortega. They're very good actors, but in this movie, they were bland. They were kind of robotic in their performances. And by the way, the dialogue in this is terrible, and there are so many boring scenes where people are just staring at their phone screens or computer screens or whatever it may be. And the message of it, that this young high school student framing her teacher for a crime he didn't commit, they kind of, like I said, glamorize it. And it's just very disturbing, and it makes you cringe. Number 8, we have the very terrible horror film Cell Phone. Don't answer the call if this pops up in your suggested feed, which more than likely, if you're a Hulu subscriber, that's where it would pop up. But this movie was incredibly boring. The setup makes no sense. The score is awful, and the ending is very bizarre. Not to mention the main character, she's okay, but she's kind of stuck in this story that doesn't make sense. And also, there's this nosy neighbor who keeps coming around and he's kind of forcing himself to be in her presence. He's very weird and bizarre, but the movie's trying to make it where he's just kind of quirky. I honestly thought the twist was that he was behind everything, that his sort of charming quirkiness as the movie was trying to present it was just a facade, and that he was actually this very disturbed individual who was causing all the things happening in this rental property where the movie takes place. But that ended up not being the case. The twist was actually incredibly worse than that, to my shock and awe. But it is not worth your time. If you're a horror fanatic, I can't even imagine you getting past the first 10 minutes of this movie. That's how bad it was. Number 7, we have Joker Felle et Dire, which of course stars Joaquin Phoenix as Arthur Fleck and Lady Gaga as Lee Quinzel. And basically, this movie just resets everything. It makes you feel bad for liking the first movie. It is incredibly a slap in the face to the fans that made Joker so popular, the fans that got Joaquin Phoenix an Academy Award. Todd Phillips basically looked all of us who liked the first movie in the eye and said, "You know what? I hate you, and here's a movie to prove it." The musical numbers are intrusive, inconsistent. They don't measure what you want. Sometimes you think that they're representing reality, and sometimes you think they're just representing Arthur's kind of bizarre take on the world, but it ends up not matching either of those. So the inconsistency of it makes the movie feel very confusing, and it wastes the talent of its cast. Joaquin Phoenix turned out a good performance, I thought, but the way he was portraying Fleck in this movie versus how the finale of the first Joker film made it didn't match up. It didn't make sense. Lady Gaga, you could tell she really wanted to turn out a good performance as Harley Quinn, but ultimately she got bad direction and a bad script, and it's not her fault. I will say she has a good singing voice. No one can dispute that. I've heard some people try to criticize her singing in this movie. I don't really understand that. I actually think she did well. It's just the songs themselves didn't make sense. And what could have been an ending with an epic crescendo, a good send off for this version of the Joker where maybe he could set up a meeting with Batman, ultimately fell apart at the end. Number 6, we have Madam Web. Madam Web may be so bad it's good, and I can actually see this kind of becoming a cult classic where people just kind of watch it to laugh at it and throw spoons at the screen and all that nonsense. But ultimately, it swings into disaster. It is a failure of a film, and in no way should it be considered a Spider-Man film. This really should be the film that ended the Sony Spider-Man less universe because it is so awful. It is so bad. Although, by all accounts, it ended with Craven the Hunter, but this is really the one that should have ended it. And I really feel bad for the film stars, especially Dakota Johnson and Sydney Sweeney. A lot of people were criticizing Sydney Sweeney in this movie, but I actually thought she did okay, again, with what she was given. I think she thought, and Dakota Johnson has outright said this, that they thought that this was going to actually be connected to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but it was actually connected to the Sony Spider-Man universe. And the writer, director of this just ultimately failed the cast and the characters that they're based on. Number 5, we have Jackpot. How does Aquafina keep getting roles? I don't know. It's this big mystery. She is awful in this comedy. It generates no laughs, not even where you're laughing at it, not with it. It generates no laughs. I didn't chuckle once. The lead, Aquafina, is clearly out of her depth. John Cena, he's okay in it, but he doesn't bring anything to the table. He's just this sort of John Cena. And the villain of the movie is introduced way too late in the movie for you to care about it. You don't even really care that much about Aquafina's character. So for those of you who don't know, it takes place in a world where whoever wins the lottery in California, people are allowed to legally hunt them down and end them so that they can get their lottery winnings. And they have to basically stay alive for 12 hours and then they win it. Or the person who gets the ticket at the end of the 12 hours is the one that gets it. And John Cena, he kind of plays Aquafina's bodyguard because she's the one who ultimately wins the jackpot. But like I said, interesting premise, but no comedic timing whatsoever. Number 4, I don't even know if I can say this on YouTube without getting struck, but the American Society of Magical Negroes. It could have been a unifying message, and it could have even portrayed the struggles of the Black community very well in sort of this urban fantasy way, but it doesn't. Its woke perspective kind of provided accidental laughs to what was going on. So if you don't know the premise, it basically follows this young man who gets recruited into this society of magical Black people, and he gets assigned to help a client who's white. And that's what they do, is they want to keep white people sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, just placated so that they don't hurt Black people. It's very offensive and don't really care about the protagonist, and like I said, its woke messaging really drowns it out. Number 3, we have Space Cadets, starring Emma Roberts as a young woman who she's kind of like a mechanical savant, and she lies on an application and gets accepted into the NASA training program. And of course, hilarity ensues. It's sort of a fish out of water comedy that kind of also tries to be a rom-com at the same time, but there are no laughs here. Don't even try it. It was an exercise in failure, and I would actually classify it as stupid. It has no redeeming qualities, and I can actually see why it went directly to streaming, although I would even say it is beneath streaming services. Like, that's how awful this movie is. There's no laughs. Emma Roberts plays an incredibly unlikable person who's a liar. She's a cheat. She's a bad friend. And you don't cheer for her. At least in some of these comedies, like, say, Tommy Boy, you want to root for Tommy, right? Even though he is kind of this awkward, large personality, he still has these redeeming qualities. But comedies these days, for some reason, don't want to give their protagonist those redeeming qualities, even in a comedic setting. So you can't really even cheer for her. And like I said, I know that it's a comedy, but it was not funny at all. Number 2, we have Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scar Giver, by, of course, Zack Snyder, one of the biggest failed movie directors of all time. Somehow it is worse than its predecessor, which was actually lower on my top 10 worst of 2023, but yet this one is worse. Now, I will say, I think Snyder has kind of found his home at Netflix, which isn't exactly known for releasing quality movies, but his sort of below B movie attitude and his approach to making movies, I should say his talentless approach to making movies, definitely has found this niche here on Netflix. So perhaps they'll do well here. I don't know. A lot of people like bad movies, but these movies, the Rebel Moon series, I mean, are terrible. They're awful. They're no good, very bad. And I can't see anyone outside of his little cult like fan base enjoying these science fiction epics. Last and certainly least, at least in the context of this list, the number 1 worst movie of the year was a French Canadian, again, comedy. Bad year for comedies, apparently. Cat and Dog. Basically, this follows this jewel thief who manages to get a hold of this ruby, and then a very poorly CGI'd dog swallows it. So he picks up the puppy and he pretends to be a blind man with his seeing dog, hoping that the dog will eventually, relieve himself of the ruby. Now, he runs into this social media influencer who uses her cat to get sort of social media famous, and the cat's name is Diva, and somehow Diva and the puppy get lost together. So this thief who pretends to be blind pretty much the whole movie, and the social media influencer, they're desperately trying to find this cat and this dog. And also, the cat and dog can talk to each other. It could have been good, but it would just have really poor writing. And it's one of the dullest comedies that I've had the displeasure to sit through. Let me just say it like that. Now, the actors did put up an effort, but it was one epic fail of a movie, and I just thought that it was awful, that it had no redeeming qualities. But what did you think? Did I miss a movie that you think should be on my list? I know that there's a lot of movies that were on people's list, but those movies I didn't even try to watch because I've heard about how bad they are. I'm a contrarian that way. But let me know in the comments what you would add, what you would take away. I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed this vidcast, be sure to give it a like, share it out to all your friends, leave me a comment and tell me what you think. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you're watching on YouTube, ring that little bell so you get notifications when I post a new vidcast, and consider becoming a channel member. Head on over to my website, StudioJakeMedia.com, where you can have even more reviews. My top 10 lists are all there, and I've got so many more. Best of all, it's ad-free and it's free to sign up. Just use your email or the WordPress app, and you can get all of my pop culture commentary, plus a lot more. If you want to support me in what I do, head on over to my locals community. You can sign up for a monthly subscription, or you can send my articles tips there. Not to mention, if you do sign up, you get exclusive articles that are just for my locals community, and you can also read my short stories exclusively there. Speaking of stories, I've written books. I might have mentioned that a few times. I've got the supernatural thriller Cacophony about a group of demons that are attacking a small town in Texas, but there's a group of angels that are sent to stop them. I also have my sword and sorcery series, The Seven Royals. It is about a group of your favorite fairy tale characters who have to unite to stop a mad mage and his dark army from taking over their lands. Book 1, All Good Things, is out. Book 2, Breaking the Stars, is out. And number 3 is on its way. It will conclude this Dark Army trilogy. Last but not least, I have Blessed Child. It is a brand new book that just came out, and it is about Faith Under Fire, about an elf princess who discovers she is pregnant with a human child, sending her kingdom into turmoil. And her father, the king, hires a knight bodyguard to protect her during this time, and they form an unlikely friendship. So check it out. Get one or all four at Amazon.com and leave me a 5-star review. It really helps out small indie creators like myself. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.